the film critics. You think they are directors or producers or actors or actresses? No, they're movie critics. They're criticizing the movie. So exactly, I mean, as a healthcare worker, I can criticize any aspect of healthcare and I can criticize it with authority.
I try to get people to think more rationally and make sure the thought process that leads to these harmful beliefs itself is not there.
Misinformation and pseudoscience has been around for years and years now, but in the last few years, maybe because of the internet, but also because of the COVID pandemic itself, we saw a barrage of misinformation like never before, whether it's myths, home remedies like take this herbal, take this kind of herb, boil it for this much time, and then you can boost your immunity, or even misuse and the kind of unscientific use of medication like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And but there have been some people fighting against this barrage of misinformation, whether it's ASHA workers on the ground in WhatsApp groups, or doctors, scientists, journalists on Twitter and Instagram, and even content creators on YouTube. And our guests on today's episode of News and Views, Dr. Abby Philip and Pranav Radhakrishnan, are two such people who have been fighting misinformation online for the past few years, fact-checking health content as well. So thank you so much for joining me, gentlemen.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this episode and this conversation. But before we get into that, I would like both of you to introduce yourselves. Maybe we can begin with Dr. Philip. Like, how did you get into this space, and what is it that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a practicing hepatologist, which is a liver disease specialist, and I practice at Rajagiri Hospital in Kochi, in Kerala. And the reason why I actually came into this space of, debunking or fighting misinformation is basically because it was personal. It was personal because it was all about my patients to start with, including children. So seeing my patients, young people, and their children actually, get into avoidable health burdens made me first look at it from a clinical perspective, where I've actually done a lot of clinical research work on it, published on it. And then I understood that just publishing in peer-reviewed journals does not cut it. You have to actually take it up to the masses. You should actually tell people what you've been working on and what the evidence is. So that is how I started using Twitter as a loudspeaker, initially for my research publications, but then slowly that spread into this aspect of public health discourse. And it's just to reduce the health burden in the community, where health misinformation actually can harm people. When we sit on social media, discuss here and there, we don't actually see what is actually happening to the people on the ground. So I deal with a lot of people who either get into a liver transplant because of a health misinformation, or actually die because of it. So it's important that doctors themselves come and actually speak about it. And this is why I started using social media as an important feature to debunk or demystify health misinformation.
Yeah, I mean, we do that even with stories. Like, it's not just enough to put out a text story. We try to put it in all platforms where we can be, heard as much as possible, whichever people are using, whether it's Instagram Reels or like put it on YouTube Shorts or whatever works. So that kind of brings me to Pranav, what you do. Why did you choose YouTube, and how did you sort of begin working in this space?
Yeah, I'm a science communicator basically, and the best way to reach a lot of people, which is what communication basically is through social media. And I've been kind of using YouTube as a consumer for many years prior, and I decided to start my own channel. And this is one area where I noticed that there was a lot of misinformation and disinformation on social media, and there was no one calling it out. Like I could see no one. No, now I know a few other channels other than mine, but at the time there was nobody else. And I thought, okay, why don't I do this? And I tried 2 3 videos, and the response was really amazing, and I just decide to keep doing it. So if there's a particular popular piece of misinformation that spreads online, I research where it came from, what is the actual science behind it, and produce a video where I actually talk about the actual science and research behind that piece of misinformation, and provide information, good information, in a way that the viewers can easily, unpack and understand, and form their opinions.
Mhm. So, I mean,
That's what I
something
do.
interesting that I kind of came across while also working as a health reporter during COVID, and observing a lot of the work you guys also do, is that people get so emotionally attached to their beliefs, their whatever, whether it's home remedies or whatever practice they have been doing, that it's not enough to just say, oh, this is not rational, or this is not scientifically backed, or here is like the evidence, because people get defensive. They don't really want to hear criticism against something that has been practiced in their homes for say year, like generations, or it's something that they have tried and tested and they feel like it works for them. So how do you go about navigating that space? Because in both your cases, you have your audiences able to immediately respond to you via comments, via your Twitter as well. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, can I go first,
Yeah,
Abby?
absolutely.
Yeah. So in the beginning, I used to be a little offensive in my videos. Like, I would use a lot of sarcasm, maybe make a few jokes that may be considered offensive by, by some people. And I realized that what was happening, I got a lot of feedback on the comments and all. And in the comments, I saw that some people would use this one joke or one line that I said that they didn't like. They would use this one line as an excuse to discard or disregard the whole video.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, you're missing the whole point of the video. And I didn't want to give them that opportunity to disregard the whole video. So I changed my tone completely. All my recent videos are a little more tone aware and little more moderate in tone, and just presenting the facts, and maybe also talking about what may be the reasons behind people believing this. Because at the end of the day, you can't change a person's mind. They have to change it on their own. And the reason anyone changes their mind is if they have the right kind of information with them. So that's what I do. I just present the right information. I don't, like, it's up to you if you want to form new opinions or change your mind or whatever you want to do. But here's the information that might enable you to do that. That's what I do.
What do you- Because I know you get a lot of backlash on Twitter for.
Yeah. What Pranav said is actually very right. I mean, when it comes to presenting something, I mean, especially on a video point of view, it's always good to not be sarcastic and be very to the point, factual. But I have a different kind of an audience and a different kind of way that I talk about scientific evidence. And on Twitter, the problem is that people actually take you for a ride if you're very nice to them, because a lot of them come there just to troll you. They are not bothered about understanding what is right or wrong. They are just there to make themselves excess baggage, so that they completely derail you from the actual tweet or content of the tweet that you are trying to make. So when you actually deal with such people, it's always good to be combative. And I am very combative on certain people on Twitter. And I do it two ways. One is to either offend them or be sarcastic in a humorous way. And either they just leave the thread and go away, which makes it looks cleaner for me, or I see somebody who actually wants to have a proper conversation with me on the topic. And some of them actually do, because when I started off doing this on Twitter, maybe 3 or 4 years back, and when I see it now, there are a lot of people who have actually changed because we've had a decent conversation, and a lot of people who have actually changed because I was combative. Because sometimes that works with certain, I'm not saying it works all the time, but it does work at some time. And you need to choose your battles well, when you need to be combative and when you don't have to. Then there are these special group of trolls, which I actually hate on Twitter, where they actually come and discuss with you, in good faith. When you look at it, it feels like they actually want to learn more from you or learn more out of it, but actually they don't. They just exhaust you, provide you with a lot of circular reasoning, and that actually makes you don't want to do proper science communication anymore. This is known as sea landing, and it is very common on Twitter. And this aspect actually does not happen in a video format, but it does happen when you have a written format. And it's important that you identify the sea lions first and then actually avoid them altogether, which makes you less combative and less exhausted and less assertive. But I feel that there is some role of combative scientific debates or arguments or scientific communications in a written format, but not so much on a video format.
Right. But also, I mean, it really surprises me why there is so much aggression against, like evidence-based medicine, or when you're trying to debunk misinformation, why there is so much aggressive backlash against it. It's are there any kind of patterns that you have noticed in your the kind of backlash that you get?
I mean, see, the whole aspect of people getting either upset about what you are talking about is because you are actually breaking their traditional beliefs that has been there for a very long time. So if I say that, haldi doodh is not going to, improve your sore throat or not going to prevent any infections in you, that a lot of people take it personally because their mother has been giving them haldi doodh every day, or their grandmother has been giving them haldi doodh every day, saying that, drink this, you'll be better. You'll have a better immunity. You can fight infections and things like that. So when they relate my aspect of saying that it does not work, they actually take it personally because their mother, their grandmothers are being persecuted here with new information. So that is when people actually have a backlash. So if they have an emotional or a personal experience behind it, they become combative and they try to assert themselves. But otherwise, what I feel that maximum backlash that I have received on Twitter because of debunking misinformation is because of the stakeholders. So a lot of them are Ayurvedic practitioners who actually wants to, it's a business. Ultimately, they want to run their practice. It's their bread and butter. So if I'm saying that I'm calling it out as a pseudoscience and doesn't work out, it actually harms them at the ground level. So they start behaving the way they have to behave to, it's like an existential crisis that they have to damage control. So these are the two factors that mostly drive why people are combative on when you actually talk about misinformation on Twitter or any other social media handle in that manner.
Yeah, but also like speaking
Just
of
to
people, yeah.
sorry about that. Just to add on to one thing that Abby said, I think so. People who feel their professions are being harmed, they should realize that medicine. The purpose of medicine is not to give you a profession, a job. It's to make someone who's sick better. And if what you're doing is not achieving that goal, then you have to realize that your job is basically scamming the gullible and getting money from them. That's ultimately what it is.
But that's a very idealistic thing to hope for, isn't it?
They might be of the belief that what they're doing is for the good, but when presented with actual facts that tell them that that's not true, then they have this sort of visceral reaction. That's what I've seen.
I mean, I think I can extend that discussion to another aspect. I mean, from a modern medicine practice, I mean, even in modern medicine practice, there are physicians who actually overprescribe or overdiagnose or overinvestigate just for the for the heck of it, for the money. I mean, it actually helps them achieve their targets and things like that. See, but ultimately, that is not pseudoscience. That is not a quackery.
And
That
that's
is just
built
bad
into
medicine.
the system, right? So yeah, so I was having this discussion also with someone, because when I wrote a story like the one we did on Giloy, I spoke to you, Dr. Avi, for that as well.
Yeah.
And people said, oh, but like even scientific papers the numbers can be fudged, and a lot of doctors also tend to overprescribe. And how do you know that this, the modern medicine is also scientific or not? But because we know drug regulations in our country, how messed up they are even in the world. So how do you know what the medicine you're getting is properly quality checked or not? But it's not built into the system, right? Those are anomalies.
So yeah, that is one wrong argument that actually people bring in, especially the alternative medicine industry brings in, that even ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine, all these things were actually overprescribed and people got money out of it, and physicians actually scammed a lot of patients and things like that. That is not actually that is bad medicine. It is not bad science. When you're actually giving a herbal supplement for something, that is actually bad science. It's pseudoscience. There is no indication for it. But medications like ivermectin, it has a role. It is a dewormer. It has its own specific role. It's not like it's completely useless, but it's been used in some other way that, it was just bad practice. So bad practice does not mean that pseudoscience can fill that gap, and take it up as the better of the lot. That is a wrong argument that a lot of people make. Bad science versus bad medicine. So I think people should understand the difference between both.
Also, maybe Pranav can answer this. Like, do you ever feel the need, because this is something that my colleagues who do fact check were also talking about. Sometimes when they're debunking misinformation related to health specifically, or some kind of pseudo science practice, they feel the pressure, the need to give the other side's story as well, to not seem biased, so that what they're putting forth is taken as seriously. So do you also feel that kind of pressure? How do you go about kind of structuring your debunking misinformation to make it as legitimate as possible?
So here you have to look at what the evidence actually says. Like, for example, take the example of flat earth. Like, if there are some flat earthers and there is some round earthers, and you have evidence that clearly shows that the earth is round, you're not gonna take the middle ground and give some validation to these flat earthers and also these round earthers. You look at where the evidence actually stands. If it's in the middle, okay, fine. Defending it being in the middle is fine. But if it's clearly to one side, then why are you trying to take the middle ground? Why don't you
But
actually
just to
say
kind
it?
of play devil's advocate, when it comes to say this kind of medicine, there are people who might say, oh, but you have not studied Ayurveda, so you don't know what Ayurveda really says. So you need to ask like an expert in that also, right?
I mean, this is very interesting because when I actually published the first study that showed Ayurvedic herbal formulations can lead to liver injury and death in the Indian Journal of Gastroenterology, the first letter, I received a lot of letters from the Ayush Ministry. And the first letter that I received, one of the points that they said my study was not valid was that I did not have an Ayurveda practitioner as one of the co-authors. I mean, this is very interesting because a lot of people actually tell me this. Even Ayurvedics themselves tell me this because you have not studied Ayurveda or homeopathy for you to criticize it. Right. I mean, look at all the movie critics, the film critics. You think they are directors or producers or actors or actresses? No, they're movie critics. They're criticizing the movie, and they criticize, some of them really criticize it well, logically. So exactly, I mean, as a healthcare worker, I can criticize any aspect of healthcare, and I can criticize it with authority because I'm actually seeing people develop a lot of complications related to a particular alternative medicine industry or alternative practice, which I feel it is important for others also to know. So from a public health point of view, I am actually pro-public or pro-health. And when I actually published a recent paper on homeopathy, or actually on Ayush immune boosting and all, I actually have an homeopath and an Ayurveda ex-co-authors in that. I mean, they work with me. They are in my clinical research department. And now their problem is that with them. So I got a letter from an Ayurveda saying that, and actually this was not a letter, this was actually a legal notice saying that, I mean, my co-author also got it, who's an Ayurveda practitioner, saying that you are an Ayurveda practitioner. Why did you join in this particular study, which is against Ayurveda? Now they have shifted the goalpost to something else. So initially when I did not have an Ayurvedic practitioner, they said you don't have an Ayurvedic practitioner. So when I included an Ayurvedic practitioner in my studies, now they're saying that why did you go and become a part of that study? So basically all these are, I don't think these kind of arguments deserve any response beyond a particular point. And I feel that these kind of arguments are also now lesser. I mean, when I started off, I used to face this kind of illogical arguments a lot, but now I don't see that anymore.
Yeah.
Adding to what Abby said, this is actually a fallacy. This kind of an argument is actually a fallacy. When you say, who are you to criticize Ayurveda? You haven't studied Ayurveda all that much. They're actually not addressing the point you're bringing. They're not addressing the argument you're making. They're addressing your credentials. This fallacy is called two coke. It's basically a kind of, who are you to say all this? They're not actually addressing the point. They're saying, hey, you have no right to say this. So that's the flaw in the argument.
That actually brings me back to, I wanted to ask, what are some popular kind of misinformation myths that you've had to kind of deal with again and again?
See, I mean, I deal with a lot of misinformation from two aspects. One is a treatment of liver disease, and second is nutrition. I mean, in misinformation in the segment of nutritional science is actually, I mean, it's so vast. It's impossible to actually, make effective corrective measures, because it's all over the place. And one of the biggest misinformation that I actually keep hearing is that in a liver disease patient who has jaundice, you are not supposed to eat a whole egg, because the yolk is yellow. You're going to add to that jaundice. This is so common, and it's like the same misinformation that you have with curd. If you have curd or drink curd at night or during when you're feeling ill, it actually increases cough and sputum production, because the cough and sputum is actually white in color, the curd is white in color, the yolk is yellow in color, jaundice is yellow. These kind of observations are all primitive observations that are actually mentioned in Ayurvedic textbooks, and people still follow that to a lot, even in current situation. So this is one very important misinformation that I always see. And the second misinformation that I see is with regards to management of liver diseases. And the most common misinformation is about whey protein. I think people have some real wrong concepts about protein in diet. And one of the biggest misinformation is that whey protein actually leads to liver damage. It causes a lot of kidney stones. It can actually harm you more. I mean, it does do that, but if it's...
But this is also
Yeah.
something that I heard from a nephrologist, that it can increase kidney stones. So
I mean, even doctors believe it. I mean, there are actual doctors who have actually cut down or asked my patients to stop taking whey protein, which I prescribe, because they're advanced cirrhotics with loss of muscle, and they actually need whey supplementation. And doctors have actually asked them to stop it, because, why didn't your liver doctor tell you? Because this is going to harm your liver more and things like that. I mean, the level of misinformation with nutritional science is far beyond we can actually imagine, not just among the patient community, but even among doctors.
what about you, Pranav, in your comments? What is something that you keep getting over and over?
So, Abby does a great job with alternative medicine. I don't think he needs any help from me in that regard. But what I do is a little more general. Like medicine, I tackle some alternative medicine, some aspects of alternative medicine in some of my videos. But if you look at the whole spectrum of the content I make, I'm more of a generalist. I look at areas where there are some physics misconceptions, there are some chemistry or bio misconceptions, even astronomy misconceptions. I tackle all of them, because I'm of the belief that, okay, alternative medicine is pseudoscience that can cause very immediate, very significant harm. But it's a product of a pattern of thinking, a thought process, which also leads to a lot of other pseudoscientific beliefs. So let's say me and Abby are successful uh, in debunking and let's say in even getting rid of all alternative medicine. This thought process still remains. It's gonna act like this fertile soil, this base on top of which a new form of harmful pseudoscience can come from. So I try to attack that base. That thought process is what I want to try and change. I try to get people to think more rationally and make sure the thought process that leads to these harmful beliefs itself is not there.
Right. And also, like you mentioned, there is this thought process, this kind of automatic thought process where people don't even question the things that they're told or have been going on believing has been in their family also. But I think when it's when that question is put forth by you or Dr. Abby or some article also, then people start kind of thinking, oh, wait, could this be maybe wrong? Because there are people who do that as well. Because I'll tell you like one story that we did like way back in 2018 about whether you can eat fish with milk, whether it's bad to eat fish with milk. Even now, it's one of our, most read stories. Every day when I open our statistics of number of stories, like the numbers page, it's one of our top most read stories, even now after all these years. So people do have that interest. Maybe it's been something that they've been hearing in their family, but when they read that headline of, oh, is it really bad for you? Then they start thinking. So maybe sometimes people just need that trigger or, that question to be put forth because it may not come naturally to everyone. And if you do it in an effective way, it can get through to people as well, right? So I want to know, what are your thoughts on like public health messaging and how to most effectively put forth your, this kind of view?
My take on public health messaging is that I think it has to be consistent. You just don't say something and then wait for a longer time to talk about it again. Like I what I do is now I get every opportunity. Every opportunity that I get to actually debunk a particular misinformation from the Ayush industry, I do it. I don't actually keep it for another day. And this consistency actually helps because people are exposed to debunking this particular misinformation at particular or regular periods. It can actually change them. And the second aspect of is that doctors are actually, doctors like me who clinically practice also and not just into research, they're actually very comfortable the way they are at the moment, right? So they don't want any additional baggage. They don't want any additional headaches. They don't want to actually tell what is right and wrong. They are happy with treating their patients, going on with a 9 to 5 job and, being at it. But I think more doctors should actually come forward and actually build on this public health messaging that the alternative medicine industry or these pseudoscientific practices are actually doing to the public. So a lot of people actually tell me that, you are the only guy who does it. That means you have some propaganda against it. That whole aspect can change when larger number of, or at least a few. I'm maybe asking for maybe 5 or 6 doctors like me who would talk from a oncology point of view or a nephrology point of view or dermatology point of view. If they start doing that, then the whole, trust of public in scientific medicine actually improves. Otherwise, it becomes one guy who is doing all this just for attention. And it's actually not that. And I'm happy that a lot more doctors are actually doing it now. And they may not be doing on a large scale, but they're actually doing it the way they can from smaller grassroots level. And it's actually very important.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to add is like a lot of social media is like there's so much information available that there's going to be a good chunk of misinformation also. So what people also from a public health point of view, what people also need to uh, be able to do is distinguish between someone who's spreading misinformation and someone who's giving you good information. Like a good green flag to look for is look for people who are calling out people on the basis of evidence and they're talking about how to think. What is the reasoning behind their thinking process, and what should be the reasoning in your thinking process, and and actually value evidence for what it is. When you start seeing a lot more creators in this doing this kind of work, I think people slowly will be able to distinguish between both. But yeah, that's an important thing that people need to be able to do. Yeah,
But
that's what I usually do.
yeah, but do you feel like you have this pressure to make your work more accessible? Because that's definitely something that we do also face, because we are, say, we are reading research papers, we're talking to experts, and there's a lot of information, but we have to put it in a way that will be accessible to people. Otherwise, there's no point, right? Like Dr. Abhi said right at the beginning, like he worked on research papers, but that is not as accessible as putting out a tweet, right? Because that will reach so many more people. So how do you make your work more
I
accessible?
I wouldn't say that that's a pressure, but I do try to keep my ideas concise. Like, I don't go into, long tangents where I go very far from the point I'm trying to make. So, but I don't see it as a pressure, because that's something I actively do to maintain retention, and that's something I've learned to do over the years. So I don't feel pressure that way. But other than staying on point, I don't really worry about that too much. Like, I don't see YouTube as something inaccessible or less accessible, because it's still social media. People would much rather watch a video than read a study, or read a long, even if it's a 5 minute long article, because that's active attention they have to spend. They can just, video will play itself, they just have to keep their eyes open. So yeah, I think video isn't that significantly harder to consume. That's what I feel. But even if it is, I mean, I have these tools that I mentioned, like video chapters, that I use to combat that.
Yeah, and I think podcasts are also the same. You can just play them in the background, and
Yeah, yeah.
I think this was a really good discussion, and I got to learn a lot from you guys. So thank you so much for being here once again, and I think we'll wind up here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us. And it was great to have this conversation with Pranav also. And I think, I mean, we discussed a lot of things that we normally don't discuss. So I think this was a special episode for me. Thank you.
Yeah, the same for me also. I really enjoyed the conversation.